So I always like to start our call giving a recap of how we ended our previous call. It gives us a perspective of what we had spoken about, especially for those who were not able to make it to our prior call. Right. So we concluded our March 21 call 3 months back with the following. Right. We said growth is coming back across the board. In many cases, due to supply constraints, uh, and we also see early signs of demand picking up. Our focus has and will continue to be to stick to companies showing a free cash flow growth in our portfolio. That's the essence of how we manage risk. Interest rates continue to remain low, and we do not see that environment changing. And we left you with a sobering thought saying that 1 crore investors in Bitcoin as of March 21 versus 2.2 crore investors in MFs. Bitcoin having a 4 year history, and in India specifically, and mutual funds having more of, let's say, 25-year history from a private market perspective. And if you go back much longer, right, kind of a sobering thought around where investors want to park their money in order to make quick gains, or however you call it. Coming back into June 21, right? Where do we stand as we speak? So obviously we've had a strong outperformance since inception as a fund. So the table here breaks down our yearly returns on a calendar year basis, meaning from Jan to Dec of each year. And this year we've had a good year so far. We've again beaten the index. That's been a consistent phenomenon around how we managed risk. And this has been due to a conscious and consistent focus on the downside as far as how we construct portfolios. One question that we've been asked constantly, I thought it makes sense to address it, is why is your benchmark Nifty 50 when you run a multi-cap focused fund? So there are two reasons for this, right? I always ask an investor very simply on any given day, do you know what is the Nifty mid cap level or what is the Nifty small cap level? Most of us don't know, right? Our easiest parameters that we track is Nifty or Sensex. So it's much easier for an investor to go back to see what is the so-called benchmark of India, which happens to be Nifty as far as I'm concerned, and basically to say that when we started the fund, we were going to benchmark it off this particular index. More importantly, why it's relevant for us is over the last 4.5 years since we started the fund, whether we like it or not, Nifty 50 has been the best performing index. You can take mid cap, you can take small cap, you can take 200, you can take what you want. But Nifty 50 has been the best performing index. So while in the last, 9 to 12 months, small cap would have outperformed Nifty 50. If you look at it over a longer time frame, Nifty 50 has clearly beaten all of these indexes. So as a fund, we wanted to take the best performing index and say, are we doing better than that or not, right? And so far, the answer has been yes, and we would continue to benchmark ourselves this way as we speak. Now, going back to our performance since inception, again, it's been fairly healthy. The fund has returned a 25.2% CAGR, as against Nifty generating around 15.61% over the same time period. Now, when we started the fund, right, we set ourselves a threshold of how we should measure ourselves. We said over every 5 year time frames, we should be continuing to beat our benchmark by roughly around 6 to 7%. We are at around 4.5 years at the moment. So far, we are well and truly done that. And the expectation is over the next 3 to 4, 5 year cycles, we continue to do the same, sticking to our philosophy. It's important for investors to understand what does downside protection even mean, right? So what we've done here is to basically take quarterly returns of the Nifty since inception. So what that means is Jan to March 2017, all the way to March to June 2021, right? So roughly there are around 4.5 years multiplied by three, so roughly around 15 quarters. Each quarter, when Nifty is up, we call it an up market. And each quarter, the Nifty is down, we call it a down market. So what we say is, how is ITIS performing both during up and down markets? So what would stand out, as you can see, is in during both during up and down markets, we have done better than the index consistently, right? So our fund has outperformed Nifty on 18 out of 14 quarters since inception, where the benchmark return was positive, right? And our fund has outperformed Nifty on 3 out of the 4 quarters when the benchmark return was negative. And the outperformance during negative periods is vastly, significantly higher than during positive periods. So, what this means is effectively what I call downside protection. Our fund is not that fund that you investors come in to maximize their returns every year. I wish there is a fund like that, but there isn't. History will tell you that there isn't. But our fund is that fund which aims to keep the investor invested in the markets for long periods of time. And the way we manage to do that is to ensure we focus on downside, because end of the day, what happens during down markets is most people tend to panic. So if you can hold your investors during that period, as long as your philosophy is sound, whether you like it or not, you will continue to compound capital. So that's from a portfolio construct perspective, right? So people who attended our March quarter call are aware that we were reducing our private sector lenders in the book, where we completely exited Axis Bank. So if you've been following the fund since inception, the March to June 2020 quarter, which is basically post the first lockdown, we took a counter stance of increasing financials significantly in the book. That thesis played out well, and most of the returns got front ended. And we felt that we wanted to be reducing leverage in the book, irrespective of where that leverage is coming from, right? So, effectively, a lot of that cash was getting deployed into non lending financials, which I'll again talk you through why and what was our thought process around this. And uh, one thing that I've always believed as a portfolio manager, right? I think there are five important aspects that a portfolio manager is supposed to do. But unfortunately, we get judged on only one, which according to me is the simplest. The first layer is what I call stock selection. This is the simplest thing for being a portfolio manager, right? And unfortunately, every investor looks at the portfolio and says, I own these stocks too. But this is the most fundamental and elementary part. To be honest, I would put my hand up and say it doesn't even matter, right? There are four layers above this that actually drive your returns, which very few people pay attention to. The second important thing, and I'm talking about each of this in order of difficulty as well. So when I say step one, which is security selection, according to me, it's the easiest. Step two is position sizing. What that means is, once I like a certain security or a hypothesis, how do I size that exposure? Third is position increasing. Very few people even look at this, right? If a thesis is playing out well, how do I increase my position size in this? Most people don't do it. It's very hard to do, right? It's like people like to buy when it falls, people don't like to add when it is doing well. Fourth is exit, right? I've always believed that buy, hold, and forget thesis really doesn't work in the market. People who have done it in the 90s and 2000s talk about examples like HDFC Bank and Asian Paints. They are good examples with the benefit of history. Capital markets have evolved since. Today is not a market where you can go and find your next HDFC Bank. It's nice on paper, but those are nice stories to narrate if you want to be selling something. It's not the way the market actually works, right? So exit is a very, very important aspect of how you think about opportunity cost. And fifth and most important, which nobody emphasizes on and is the hardest thing to do, is communication. Because end of the day, I think when the market is up, everyone is okay, they're happy, the returns are there, right? But when the market is down, that's when investors are panicking. They look up to the manager to communicate better, and more often than not it reverses. The manager stops to communicate because there is panic all around, right? Accountability drops. And I think all five put together is how a portfolio manager should be judged, or at least that's how we evaluate ourselves as a fund manager. Now, coming back to the portfolio health, again, I want to spend some time on this, right? So, we finished the March quarter earnings roughly around a month back, right? So, if we look at FY20 to FY21, right? If we look at our portfolio specifically, the portfolio health that Marklin spoke about at its very best is because of the free cash flow growth but going by about 147%. Right now, the ROC of our portfolio is around 23%. The gross profit margin is around 55%. Why does gross profit margin matter? Because it basically tells you for 1 rupee of revenue, how much of it is actually getting converted into potential getting converted into possibility post raw material cost. What is my gross profit? After that, you have depreciation, amortization, interest expense, whatever, right? Salaries, and that translates into your bottom line and cash flow over time. So the reason why I want to spend some time on this is because obviously there is a feeling in the market that we are at all time highs, and every time the market goes to an all time high, people get concerned. The beauty of us as investors is when the market falls, we get concerned. When the market goes up, also we get concerned. So we are paranoid. We can't change that as humans. But so the only thing that we have to do is resort to numbers to see, do we have any margin of safety, or are we basically taking on more risk than we need to in any particular market. So it's important to realize when the free cash flow growth grows in our portfolio by 148%. If you look at our performance in the last same period, right, it's been around 72% from a price change perspective. So what that means is the fundamentals of the portfolio has gone up almost 2x versus the actual price change. This is what I call margin of safety as far as our portfolio is concerned. I'll repeat, this is not a market, this is our portfolio. So I'm not commenting about the market here, right? I'm commenting about margin of safety on our portfolio, which according to me is important to decide whether we should be, how should we be evaluating risk in our portfolio at any point of time. This is where I want to spend some time, right? Because today, when a new investor is deploying cash, the important thing to address is how do we deploy the cash. So the first thing that I will keep reiterating is we do not believe in model portfolios. So we do not just invest because cash is available, right? We would be slow to deploy capital in these markets. And what does that mean? I'll again take an example. So our exposure of companies would be slightly different across different portfolios depending on when they came in, but it would normalize over time. So how do we size our investments? So let's take an example, right? Let's take the example of Syngene, which is there across all our portfolios today. If an investor was an early investor, so we bought Syngene early 2018, right? Way before COVID-19 or lockdowns or pharma became the so-called popular theme. And many investors would find, the original investors would find Syngene at an exposure of double digits today because of the gains that the company has generated from a price move perspective over the last 3 years. Now, our broad thesis on this company remains unchanged, right? However, for investors coming in today, the exposure in the same company would only be 5 to 6%. Now, why this difference? Specifically with this company, I would want to see the company increasing its fixed asset turns. What that means is, over the last 3 years, the company has been deploying 2,200 crores roughly of new assets in terms of capex expansion funded through free cash flows. Now, these new assets need to actually get converted into sales, which is 1 to 2 year process. And that turns is what you call the efficiency of this company. Roughly, fixed asset turns of Syngene historically has been around 3.2 to 3.3. Today, it is around 1.8. Why that drop? Because capex has increased. Now, as the demand cycle has gone up, as the turns come into the market, you would see this 1.2, 1.8 go back to 3.3, which will translate into top line and which will go into free cash flows, right? So what you call as your multiple today, while it might look inflated, technically, as things improve, it will normalize itself. So here again, looking at PE as a standalone is not a good idea unless and until you understand the business model. So why a lower exposure today is because I would want to see execution. So this is what I call execution monitoring of a portfolio. Just because we like a particular stock doesn't mean that we forget about it. We need to be monitoring this in order to ensure this fixed asset turns is actually increasing. And if not, why not? Is it more of a structural worry? And that means we need to change our view. Or at that point of time, as it executes, as things pan out, would we actually then increase the exposure at that point of time? So, end of the day, investing is not around saying I like a stocks, let's buy and everything will work out. No, investing is about having a thesis, ensuring that thesis pans out in terms of numbers, monitoring it, and then figuring out if the monitoring is not working out, is it more of a short term trend or is it something that we need to worry about. So we would take our time in order to normalize these exposures over time, and this is how we would think about the exposure normalized. Important question to ask is why this non-lending financials increase, right? Where is it actually increasing due to, and why are we increasing this? So the first increase was in a company that we did, let's see, 3 to 4 months back. We started adding, we've been increasing our exposure, called UTI AMC, right? Now, AMC business is actually very simple. You have two levers: revenues, which are basically linked to your AUM growth, and expenses, which you want to keep cutting down. Now, UTI AMC has clearly had legacy issues, right? It's a PSU. It has a PSU connotation to it. So people obviously don't like it. I don't think that's going to change in the next few years. However, inherently, when you study the business, there's a lot that's happening on the ground that is changing. 3.5 years back, they changed their CIO to a fairly well-respected gentleman, Vetri Subramaniam. I think most people in the industry would be aware of his track record and what he's built. And he's translated the Invesco process into UTI. To me, a mutual fund industry is an access product. It's never a return product. I think people always confuse the two. A mutual fund is not supposed to give you excess returns. It's supposed to give you index plus returns. It is meant for people to get access into the product. It's not being sold that way, but it is what it is. So it is predominantly going to get governed by how well you distribute your AMC. And UTI AMC, if you had checked 3 years back in any of the bank and wealth counters, they were not empaneled for obvious legacy reasons. And that has changed in the last 3 years through consistent performance as well as very consistent portfolio positioning, right? And you can see this daily AUM chart over the last 1.5 years as to where things are. Now they've crossed 2 lakh crores in AUM as well. Now, if you go slightly more granular, right, where we've broken down the monthly AUM of equities and debt. Obviously, the 58.79% growth in equities is a contribution of both mark-to-market gains as well as equity inflows. The debt, they were coming off a crisis back in 2018, and they are slowly recovering from there as well, right? So the AUM growth is coming from a healthy mix of equity and debt. Now, one thing to understand is an AMC always has a lag in terms of AUM growth and revenues. AUM growth happens first, revenues gets translated 3 to 6 months once it normalizes, because that's how you charge. So you're seeing a very steady growth in terms of revenues as well as the management fees continues to pick up. So, end of the day, the revenue levers of the AMC seems to be going through an inflection point as far as we look at it. The second thing is on the cost lever, right? Now, the important thing from a PSU is they are dealing with VRS issues. They've been dealing with it since 2002. They're taking a concerted effort to cut this. Now, how do I measure cost, or how do we measure cost internally as a team? HDFC AMC is best in class. There's no doubt about it. They have their own issues too, but from a cost perspective, it's at 12 bips of AUM. UTI AMC 1.5 years, one year back was roughly around 36 bips of AUM from cost, highest in the industry in the listed space. Today it's at 32, right? So if their cost base comes down from 32 to 28 over the next 1.5 years, that goes straight into the bottom line. So there is a very big re-rating possibility over the next 2 to 3 years if these trends continue. Now, equity investing is never one way. So there are risks to this business too, right? If India goes through a deflationary environment where this liquidity is high, but we don't get growth, maybe equity inflows stop. So all of this thesis needs to get reevaluated. But as we speak, what we see is if our thesis goes wrong, there's not much to lose. But if our thesis is right, I think there is a significant compounding story ahead of us. So that's one of our new investments that we made.
Naveen, thank you for that update and the questions that you've answered. Thank you, Naveen and Ajit. I also thank all the participants on the call for taking time to be a part of the call.